Right. The summer transfer window is officially in full swing. And if your world is anything like ours right now, you're navigating an absolute tsunami of rumors, tweets, conflicting reports.
Oh, yeah.
And enough, here we goes, to make your head spin. Trying to figure out what's genuine, what's noise, what could actually change things. It's a mission in itself.
It really is. The sheer volume, it's just staggering. Every club seems linked with 10 different players. Every agent seems to be leaking something different, you know?
Exactly. And that's why we're cutting through the chaos today. We've taken your sources, this stack of notes right here, and crucially, a transcript from a recent deep dive football discussion, and we're going to extract the signal from the noise.
Yeah, find the important stuff.
Our mission is to find the most important nuggets of knowledge, the surprising details, and help you understand what truly makes a potential summer signing a smart one.
And we're not just listing names, are we? We're diving into the arguments presented in your sources about why these moves might happen. Whether they're, brilliant strategic opportunities, maybe risky punts, or perhaps just pure fantasy and what impact they could actually have on the teams and players involved.
So whether it's a world-class star making a statement move, established Premier League player seeking a new lease on life, or maybe a young talent who could disrupt a system, we're going to unpack the logic, the concerns, the potential upside, all laid out in this material.
Basically giving you the context.
Yeah, giving you the context to understand the real dynamics behind the headlines.
So if you want to be well-informed, understand the thinking, and really get a handle on the potential game changers this summer, you're definitely in the right place.
Okay, let's dig into this stack of sources. And we're starting with a potential signing that your sources flag with a truly massive comparison. Florian Wirtz to Liverpool. The bold claim made, potentially the biggest Premier League arrival since Erling Haaland.
Wow. Yeah, that comparison alone tells you the level of player we're talking about, doesn't it? And what stands out from your sources is why this move feels different for Liverpool. Historically, they've excelled at identifying players just before they hit global superstardom, like Suarez, Torres, Salah,
Right. They brought players on the cusp and sort of elevated them.
Exactly. Wirtz, by contrast, he's already widely considered, in the top 10 players globally now.
So this isn't signing potential. It's signing certified, established, world-class talent already, kind of at the peak of their powers.
Pretty much.
The sources frame this as a huge sign of intent from Liverpool, especially coming off a league title win. It signals they aren't content to just maintain, they want to elevate again.
Yeah, this mirrors what your sources describe as the behavior of dynastic teams. The Man United sides of the past or the current Man City under Pep. They add top talent even after winning big, like City signing Mahrez after a 100-point season. It's about pushing standards higher, not just replacing players.
And the sources also mention other players linked with Liverpool, like Frimpong and Milos Kerkez.
Yeah. Frimpong's connection with Wirtz at Leverkusen is highlighted specifically.
So the thinking is bringing in a former teammate could ease Wirtz's transition, help him settle quickly.
That seems to be the suggestion, yeah. Which brings up a fascinating debate within your sources. Is Wirtz actually necessary?
Right, given perceived needs potentially addressed elsewhere, like a striker or left back maybe covered by Frimpong or Kirk as links.
Or is it simply, as the sources put it, such a good opportunity that Liverpool must pursue it, regardless of other needs?
And the leaning from your sources seems to be towards the latter, the opportunity argument.
Yeah, the chance to sign a player of Wirtz's caliber, especially after winning the league and with Slot's transition seemingly going smoothly.
It might just make Liverpool a more attractive destination now than, say, Bayern or Man City, who reportedly missed out.
That's the thinking presented. It could be a real market coup if they pull it off.
So the core insight here seems to be that Liverpool, post-title, is strategically positioned and maybe willing to shift its transfer philosophy a bit.
Yeah, to target established elite talent. It signals a new level of ambition, maybe market power, to try and build a dynasty.
Okay, let's shift from a potential statement signing to a player whose departure seems, almost certain according to these sources. Jack Grealish at Man City.
Grealish.
Your sources are pretty definitive about his lack of minutes in 2025. Just 144 Premier League minutes, apparently, and not even getting into the FA Cup final squad.
Yeah, the assessment from your sources is quite blunt. The signing has been a bit of a disaster.
Wow.
They do acknowledge that judging a player isn't purely about numbers. but his City tally, never more than 6 goals or 11 assists in a season, is seen as significantly underwhelming for that price tag.
And the dominant narrative presented is one of a stylistic mismatch, isn't it?
Very much so. Pep's system is described as risk-averse and very system-focused, which potentially stifles
What the sources call maverick individual players, like Grealish.
Exactly. It's argued he's looked overawed or like a shadow of his former self compared to his Aston Villa days.
Even his contributions in the treble season, like ball retention, are framed as maybe being slightly gassed up rather than, demonstrating that game-breaking impact expected.
Which raises the crucial question, where does he go to rediscover that Aston Villa form? Your sources propose 2 main destinations.
Right. West Ham is one.
Yeah, the idea there is he could find the freedom that he had at Aston Villa, a place where he can be the main creative force.
And prove myself once again. Get back in the England squad, maybe.
That seems to be the logic. It's acknowledged West Ham finished 14th and had a tough season, but the sources argue they're actually a lot better than their position this year suggests.
Potential fee is a factor for them, though, obviously.
Of course. The alternative suggested is Spurs.
Spurs. Okay, how's the fit there seem?
Stylistically, your sources argue this might be a better fit, playing alongside young wingers in a more fluid system, potentially, plus offering Champions League football.
So it's framed as a place where he could get his career back on track, find a manager who can help him start enjoying his football again.
Exactly. The takeaway from the Grealish situation, according to your sources, is really that for a player with his undeniable talent, finding the right environment that allows him to express his unique skill set is far more critical than maybe the club's current status or league position. He needs a platform where he doesn't feel constrained.
It's a stark reminder, isn't it? Even for immense talent, that tactical and environmental fit is just paramount.
Absolutely.
Speaking of Man City, let's flip it and look at who they might be targeting. Your sources suggest City feel a need to get their transfer business back on track after some recent signings.
Yeah, ones that haven't had the expected impact.
Perhaps ironically comparing the Grealish signing to Liverpool's current pursuit of Wirtz, suggesting City tried this kind of big statement move back in 2021.
Right, and there's a sense presented in your sources that Pep Guardiola now has a clearer vision for the last incarnation of this City team under him.
Which might influence their targets and strategy this summer.
Could do. The sources mention a few names. Nori, which sounds like Javardiol.
Yeah, maybe a nickname or slight mishearing in the source transcript. Described as a proper up-and-down wing-back.
Right, contrasting with City's recent preference for converting center-backs into full-backs. But a question is posed. Does he offer significantly more in that role than Javardiol already provides?
Good question. Then there's Jashari from Club Brugge.
Yes, the defensive midfielder, impressed with outstanding games in the Champions League, apparently.
He's described as an amazing ball progressor, and his style is likened to Declan Rice.
Which is high praise. Your sources position him as a deep-line playmaker who, somewhat unusually, also excels in the final third.
So collects deep, but can also unlock things further up.
Sort of, yeah. Think of a player who starts moves deep, but has the vision and technique to contribute directly closer to goal, too. He's estimated to cost over 35 million euros and is seen as a potentially smart signing for City.
To get ahead of other clubs, maybe?
Yeah, steal a march on them. But perhaps the most debated potential signing for City is Ryan Cherki from Lyon.
Cherki. Right. Your sources call him potentially the biggest market opportunity given his talent and price.
Labeled a maverick, creative, attacking midfielder who has practically mastered the final third and can unlock defenses at will. High praise again.
Yeah. But here's where the fascinating debate lies, according to these sources. They squarely present him as the anti-Pep player because, simply put, he doesn't defend.
Okay, He's described as an old-school playmaker, a style not typically associated with Pep's emphasis on intense pressing and defensive work from everyone.
Even contrasted with De Bruyne's high work rate.
Exactly. So the big question is, does Pep take a risk on a player who doesn't naturally fit the defensive system, especially if they're looking for a potential successor to De Bruyne?
The forces suggest Cherki's representative should look for a club that can maximize the best of Ryan Cherki's skill set, implying City might not be that place.
But there is a counter-argument presented, too.
Which is?
Could playing under Pep, even for just a couple of years, help develop that missing side of his game? And the raw creative talent is undeniable.
He's highlighted as being second in Europe for expected assists,
Right. Behind only Himself, apparently. Which is interesting phrasing in the source, but highlights the point. The potential is clearly there. It's just a huge question mark over the system fit.
Okay, let's move to another Premier League giant and a target they're reportedly close to. Man United and Bryan Mbeumo from Brentford.
Mbeumo, yeah. Your sources suggest he's currently more likely to go to Man United.
He's certainly seen as a top player, placed in that tier just below the absolute elite wingers in Europe. Yamal, Salah, Saka, Ousmane Dembele sort of level below them.
A very good player, yeah. But the question your sources immediately raise is whether there's potentially better out there for him, given United's current state.
Clubs like Newcastle, Dortmund, or Milan are mentioned as alternatives.
However, his potential 50 million price tag might limit options, which makes United a huge opportunity for him with relatively little to no competition for his signature at that price point.
The tactical fit at United is a major point of discussion, though. Where would he actually play?
Your sources argue he should be utilized as close to goal as possible, ideally as a number 10.
But this leads to a concern about a potential dual 10 setup with Matheus Cunha, who United are also linked with.
Right. Both are described as incredible dribblers and goal threats, but perhaps not primary chance creators for others.
So your sources pose the question, is that really the best you can do at number 10? And how that pairing would balance with Bruno Fernandes, assuming he stays.
There's also the debate about his numbers at Brentford. Are they potentially a bit inflated by him being the focal point in Thomas Frank's highly structured system?
His clinical finishing this season is noted, though, even without receiving many high-quality chances.
True. And a crucial point your sources highlight is the unknown factor. Very few players have left Brentford for big Premier League clubs and consistently replicated their output. It's a bit of a gamble.
The sources also speculate his signing could signal United planning for an actual attacker playing at right wing back on a permanent basis.
Which would be a significant tactical shift, wouldn't it?
Definitely. Zooming out, your sources question United's overall transfer strategy. They point to the need to resolve the futures of players like Rashford, Anthony, Sancho, Mount even.
While potentially spending $110 million on Cunha and Mbeumo.
It's debated whether United are prioritizing market opportunities based on price rather than core squad priorities, especially after finishing, 15th?
Yeah, quite low. They also mentioned potential sales like Bruno Fernandes linked to Al Hilal or maybe Garnacho.
Whose value as an academy graduate helps with PSR, profitability, and sustainability rules.
Exactly. Necessary funding sources, perhaps.
Right. Shifting focus to other potential movements involving Premier League talent. Let's start with Kaoru Mitoma from Brighton, linked with Bayern Munich.
Mitoma to Bayern. Yeah, your sources see this making sense for Bayern, who could use a pacey winger.
He's called a special player to watch, underrated this season, and proven in the Premier League.
His price is a factor, around 50 million euros mentioned, but Brighton reportedly rejected 90 million previously, so not cheap.
What's interesting is his age, 28, compared to his relatively short professional career history. He's seen as a late bloomer.
Famously writing his university thesis on dribbling technique not that long ago.
Incredible story. The thought is that with Mitoma, Jamel Musiala, and potentially Michael Elise, Bayern could assemble perhaps the most entertaining forward line in Europe.
Which could make the Bundesliga a cakewalk again for them, as your sources put it rather bluntly.
Another Brighton player linked with the move is João Pedro, potentially to Newcastle.
João Pedro. Yeah, highly praised in your sources. Great player, very intelligent, really technical skill set, having had a coming-of-age season.
The tactical question at Newcastle is raised, particularly with Alexander Isak seemingly secure for at least another year.
Your sources suggest João Pedro could play as a striker, maybe rotate with Isak, or drop deeper as an attacking midfielder to facilitate Isak.
However, the stronger argument presented in your sources is that Newcastle's primary need remains a right winger.
Yeah, despite Jacob Murphy having a decent season, they argue Newcastle needs a proper continental star there to truly elevate the front line.
Especially to add depth for Champions League football, citing Bruno Guimaraes' quote about the squad feeling short last time they were in the competition.
João Pedro's potential as a creator is noted too. Newcastle's current top creator, Anthony Gordon, creates about 1.9 chances per game, so there's room for improvement there.
And his high work rate is highlighted. Top 10 for possessions won in the final third.
Yeah, fits the Eddie Howe mold. And there's that historical footnote. Your sources mention Newcastle were reportedly close to signing him 3 years ago.
The Romano. Here we go. That wasn't.
Apparently so. The debate here revolves around the potential cost versus whether it's an astute signing given Brighton's likely asking price.
But with the reported budget potentially north of $200 million, Newcastle could theoretically afford multiple attacking reinforcements.
They could. And just a brief revisit to a familiar face, Kevin De Bruyne potentially leaving Man City.
Right, your sources touch on the link to Napoli, calling it a perfect fit and something that would be really, really fun to watch.
They emphasize that despite his age, he's still performing at a phenomenal level, second in Europe for expected assists, behind only Turkey, as we mentioned.
And connecting this to the bigger picture, the sources suggest landing De Bruyne would be a massive statement for Napoli under Antonio Conte.
Conte, who has that incredible record in Serie A, winning 5 of the 6 seasons he's managed there. Getting De Bruyne could potentially even persuade Conte to stay longer. Big boost.
Huge. Now let's turn to Chelsea's ongoing search for a striker, with Hugo Ekitike from Frankfurt linked.
Ekitike, okay.
Your sources frame Chelsea's need as finding a forward who is a guarantee of instant performance, someone they can rely on for a potential title challenge in the next couple of years.
And Ekitike is described as a proven player at a good level, a precocious talent with good dribbling ability.
And the ability to open up space for others or make chances for himself.
This profile is contrasted with pure goal-getters like Osimhen or Gyökeres, suggesting Ekitike could be more of a link-up player, potentially working well with someone like Cole Palmer.
Your sources offer a pretty critical assessment of Nicholas Jackson, though.
Yeah, well, acknowledging he's shown real promise, he's been held back by injuries, inconsistency, and issues with ability to put away chances.
The argument is that Jackson is a great squad player, but not a starting number 9 for a team aiming to win the title. Not title-winning quality just yet.
His temperament issues are also noted, that Newcastle incident.
Right. And this highlights a broader point from your sources about the current striker market lacking guarantees.
Pretty much. Osimhen is seen as potentially the only one, but he's likely heading to Saudi Arabia.
So signing anyone else mentioned, Sesko, Delap, Ekitike, Gyökeres, is viewed as taking a big punt.
However, your sources also note that Chelsea's approach under the new ownership seems less gung-ho than under Abramovich, more patient.
Which suggests they might be more willing to take a carefully considered punt on a player like Ekitike.
Potentially, yeah. Prioritizing profile and potential long-term fit over an immediate guaranteed return, which seems unavailable anyway in the market right now.
The sources also briefly flagged Chelsea's wing positions as another area of potential uncertainty this summer.
Worth keeping an eye on.
Finally, let's wrap up with perhaps the most talked about potential return, the one laced with the most sentimentality. Jordan Henderson back to Sunderland.
The hometown hero narrative.
Classic stuff. And your sources are unequivocal on this one. I actually don't want this to happen.
Strong words. Despite the undeniable romance, there's a really strong argument presented against it.
And the core reason. It directly contradicts Sunderland's successful building model.
Yeah, they have the second youngest squad in England's top 4 divisions. Their whole strategy is based on signing young players cheaply, like Trai Hume or Joby Bellingham, developing them and selling them on for significant profit.
The likely departure of Joe Bellingham to a Champions League club in Germany, Dortmund or Frankfurt mentioned, is presented as a prime example of this model working.
And being the right path for young talent, even with Sunderland expected to be back in the Premier League where they'll likely struggle initially.
So signing a 35-year-old like Henderson, whose recent form at Ajax hasn't been particularly effective, with fitness issues and high potential wages for maybe only 15 starts.
It's seen as the complete antithesis of this youth-focused, profit-driven strategy that's actually worked for them.
Your sources bluntly call the link nothing more than nostalgia, comparing it to the old adage, never go back to your ex,
suggesting it's destined to end in heartbreak.
While acknowledging the potential value of experience for a young squad.
Which is valid.
Your sources argue there are other ways of getting experience without compromising the core model, pointing to existing captains like Dan Neil or exploring other experienced player options.
And the changing perception of Henderson among the Sunderland fan base since he left is also mentioned as a complicating factor. It's not straightforwardly positive.
The key insight here, it seems, is that sentiment, while powerful in football, can be a dangerous basis for transfer strategy.
Especially for a club with a clearly defined and successful youth development model that a signing like Henderson would completely undermine.
Your sources mention other potential signings like Enzo Lefebvre or maybe a return for Dan Neal's brother, Dan Ballard. Sorry, Dan Neal's the captain, but maybe getting Dan Ballard back from Millwall or someone like Enzo Lefebvre. Players who would fit Sunderland's model much better.
Yeah, players who fit the profile.
So we've taken a deep dive into a really fascinating mix of potential summer transfers suggested in your sources, from world-class stars signaling new ambition to established players seeking revival in a new environment.
Young talents presenting tactical puzzles, and even romantic returns that might just be best left as memories.
By unpacking the underlying arguments about system fit, strategic necessity, market value, and club ambition laid out in this material, you've hopefully gained a clearer perspective on the logic, or sometimes the lack of it, driving the transfer window frenzy.
Yeah, trying to make sense of it all.
This summer feels like clubs are having to make some tough choices, doesn't it? Balancing huge fees for perceived guarantees against clever bets on emerging talent, or trying to unlock potential in players needing a change.
Definitely a balancing act.
So here's something to mull over as we wrap up. In the chaotic pursuit of that elusive smart deal, is the savviest move about securing a known level of performance? Or is it about finding a player whose unique, perhaps even unconventional skill set perfectly matches a specific tactical need, regardless of how they fit the traditional mold?
Good question. Fit versus perceived guarantee.
And how much risk can clubs really afford to take right now in the quest for that perfect fit?
Think about the strategic trade-offs every club we discussed is facing this summer. Lots to consider.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the summer transfer market.